Welcome to the Funded Now What podcast with your host, Andrew Lee Miller. Brought to you by GrowthExpertz. You are in store for a chat about funding, marketing, startups, and all things growth.
All right, everybody, thanks so much for coming back to the Funded Now What podcast. I'm super excited because for the first time, I've had lots of amazing guests, but they haven't been tools that I've really been able to use. And maybe I'm not. I talked a little bit offline with Chris about the target. Maybe it's not the right thing, but newsletters, it's something that we all consume. We all try to do for our businesses. It's very time consuming as a business to make newsletters, but we know the ROI is massive for keep staying top of mind, re-engaging, increasing customer lifetime value, expanding your audience for very cheaply, growing a newsletter. It does all of those things, but now you've got AI to do it. And so I've got the CEO, Chris Sopher from Letterhead AI, just raised $5.3 million. Chris, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, super excited. Give us the lowdown. I just tried to do a little background on Letterhead, but what led you to starting the company and what is Letterhead all about?
We came out of the media kind of publishing agency world ourselves, actually. So my co-founders and I, we started a business called Where by Us back in 2014 that started out really as a kind of local marketing and creative agency. We did a lot of events. We produced different things with customers in Miami, which is where we're based, and we started there. And then as we grew, it kind of became a media business. We built these big email lists that became kind of the core of what we did. And so we actually sort of went into the kind of publishing media space and launched a brand here in Miami called The Nootropic, and then sort of took that model to some other cities as well. And in the process of doing that, we became very like email oriented as a company and built some internal software that was sort of helping us with some of our challenges. And we ended up seeing this opportunity to, turn some of those tools into software for other kinds of companies to use. And that's really where Letterhead came from. So we became a sort of independent company at the beginning of 2022 out of that media business, which, now operates basically independently.
So awesome. Yeah, you build something for yourself. I think I heard that Slack was created like that too. It was actually the chat tool for a different project. And then you see that things are working, you test it with a couple of people in your circle and they love it. And you're like, all right, we're going to market with this whole other thing. And those other businesses, did you raise significant capital for those as well? Or Letterhead is now scaled faster than that? Or how's that looking?
We did raise money for Where by Us for the media business. The investors for that company were, a little bit more sort of interested in the local market, in the media business, a little bit different from the kind of venture profile of investor that's interested in a B2B software company. But yes, we did raise money for that.
Awesome.
The first money we raised for Where by Us was really at the local level here in Miami from other locals who were interested in kind of supporting that product that we had made. But yeah, absolutely, Letterhead is growing more quickly and sort of faster, higher growth profile. That's one of the benefits of being in the software business, right? Is that you have, if you're doing it well, or if things are going well, you have a lot of room to grow. And
absolutely,
as you make progress on the software, you can get some acceleration, kind of snowball effect.
Totally.
That.
Very different than local fundraising and having a local geo-focused product. From a user acquisition point of view, from an investor point of view, local investors are going to be generally not as sophisticated as or at least not under as high competition for fundraising as well as your nationwide or global VCs. That's really interesting. Walk us through who's the target demographic for Letterhead, because like I said before we started recording, I was so excited and you were like, I think you might be too small for us, Andrew. So burst my bubble.
I didn't say quite like that, but yes, so we work mostly with teams and companies that are trying to do long-term audience engagement and kind of content-driven interaction with their audience. We work with a lot of media and publishing companies, so radio, TV, print, online media, things like that. A lot of B2B, like information subscriptions. We work with a lot of marketing and creative agencies, and also with a lot of software companies. And so they use our technology basically to help them build high quality, engaging email products more quickly, more automatically at scale. So most of our customers are sending, many different newsletters to different audiences or profiles or groups.
Oh,
It
wow.
might be a media site that has, 5 different emails you can sign up to, or, a company that actually has multiple different local branches or areas,
Hmm.
or something like that. That's the kind of use
Wow.
case that we really built Letterhead to serve.
That's awesome. So, the thing I want to mention there is we're still in a phase where a lot of marketers and, professionals are scared of AI. And what Chris just said is really important. The marketing agencies are using the tool. These companies are using the tool. It's not to put employees out of business. It's to make what would otherwise not be feasible for the current team feasible, right? And so, having multiple newsletters for one marketing team is incredibly daunting task, especially if they're going out simultaneously. So what Letterhead is doing is making, the multivariate different versions of newsletters for different segments. And then I'm sure you're expecting those teams to review the content and still have a human element over it, or is it just fully automated and it all goes through Letterhead and no humans even need to see it?
Well, you get that option. I mean, we have customers where they're setting
Wow.
up their template and, they're designing what they want, and then our system is creating that email product every day or however often for them, and they don't need to review it because,
Wow.
they know what content sources they're pulling from, or they trust what the system is doing, to build that. But we do always send them a draft, but
Of
a certain
course.
number of hours
Of course.
beforehand and so forth, so they can view that. But yeah,
Wow.
most of our customers do some sort of review of the product for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I think our general view there is that the AI tools that are being rolled out, if you're a marketing agency or you're a marketer, it's going to be really tough to use those tools to figure out the strategy, to figure out the voice and tone, to
Right.
put down the kind of first, version of something, because that's really where you're staking your claim. And I know there's a lot of opinion about like, hey, you use AI to make your first draft. Personally, I actually don't. I think that's the opposite of how I think about using it, because
Hmm.
for me anyway, the first draft is where I'm figuring out what I want to say and how I want to say it and what I want to communicate. And those are the things that, in my view, you have to say
Yeah.
and
That's the
figure out.
human
And it has to,
element.
yeah, it has to come from you. But then if I say, hey, look, this is the kind of product that I want. This is the way I want to be engaging with my audience. This is the kind of content that I want to put in here and how frequently I want to do it and stuff like that. If you know some of that at the outset, well, then can you use software to help you scale that
Of
up
course.
and do it to more different groups of people and so forth? That's a great place for software to intervene and help kind of
Yep.
supercharge you. So that's kind of the way we
Absolutely.
see it, is almost the reverse of some of that advice that's out there. That's like, hey, use AI
Interesting.
for your first draft. It's like, we don't, the customers we work with, they're not new to email. They're already doing it, but it's a
Right.
question of how do I scale it? How do I make it more efficient? And that's a great place for software to make an impact, because we can take that raw material that a customer has an idea or a
And
starting
expand on it.
place, and then, yeah, figure out how to grow it.
Amazing. It's all about the prompt. It's all about the prompt,
Right.
So you have to let it marinate with you as the artist, the marketer, the person that's coming up with the idea. And the more of your unique sauce that you can give to the AI, the more heavy lifting that AI can do for you. And I mean, that's amazing to hear. You're the first founder in AI I think I've ever heard from. They're like, nope, you don't even have to review it. Everybody's like, yeah, I think you should review it. And as a marketer who sends emails, to hundreds of thousands of people for different clients, we want that hyper protectiveness because of so many.
Exactly.
Every marketer's got a nightmare moves. It's been a decade for me since it's happened, thank God. But where something bad goes out and it's, hey, first name is still in the email, and then the client is like, that's the end of your life, you feel like, as a marketer. So the AI probably even reduces a little bit of the human error there, and makes it even safer for companies. Do you find that companies have a tough time trusting the AI, or right away they get it and they see the value? Be honest.
Well, I think that, I mean, absolutely everybody wants to know whether they can trust the system or not, right? And I don't think we've ever seen anybody come on and be like, okay, I set up this template, it's automated, now I'm just going to let it go. I mean, absolutely not, right? That's nuts. But I do, we don't sort of position Letterhead as, hey, like, let our AI just do the whole thing for you, right? And part of the reason for that is that, I think people should be mistrustful of that, because, if somebody sells you something that feels like it's a little bit too good to be true, like, it's that's probably
It is.
right.
Yeah.
And so, the way we think about it is like, hey, what if the software was able to do more of the work for you? What if more of that process was able to be automated? What if,
Yeah.
fewer of those decisions had to be on your plate every day or every time you want to send something like that? That's the stuff that's valuable, right?
100%.
And because that's more like in the mix of it, I think it's easier for people to trust that over time, because I'm not saying like, hey, buy Letterhead and then walk away. I'm saying, hey, we're going to help, level this up in a kind of, step-by-step way.
Yeah.
And we're providing we have a really awesome support team and account management. And, again, because we serve kind of businesses that are operating, that's really important, and we can afford to do that at that scale. And it's a really critical part. So, I do think there are AI tools out there that are like, hey, you come and use the tool, you put in your credit card, you can use it, but there's not a ton of support. It's a small
Right.
team, and sometimes that's great. But for what we do, we think pairing the kind of automation and intelligence of software with
Yep.
people who know the sector and the channel really well and can like work with you, and you can get them on the phone and stuff. If you could put those two things together, okay, now I have a really interesting value
Especially with those
proposition.
clients. Those clients need
Totally.
service as well. And so that makes a lot of sense. And going back to the what you just said with the sales efforts of the business, if you're AI trying to put the client out of business, like the marketer or the agency, like, we make you irrelevant, buy our tool. Like, it's a very difficult sales process, as opposed to understanding, the value that they want is to look good
Yeah.
for their clients. And if you provide that with saving them time and money, easy sale all of a sudden. It's the same
Exactly.
thing for us at GrowthExpertz. We're marketing consultants. We often work with startups that have a CMO and grow their team. We work alongside the CMO. We're not trying to put the CMO out of business. No, use us instead of your internal team. That wouldn't work. So we
Right.
all want the same goal. So that's really cool. Let's talk about this $5.3 million seed round. Late last year, one of the toughest times in recent memory to raise money. You mentioned that you already had some fundraising experience, even though it was like a local grassroots level. How was it raising money for this, even though, again, you're the double whammy newsletter plus AI tool and B2B SaaS all at the same time? Well, how was it? What kind of feedback can you give for people that are struggling right now to raise money?
I think it depends a ton on what stage you're at, right? I mean, as you grow, traction and the numbers start to solve a lot of problems, right? I actually think the hardest place to raise money is in those pre-revenue or like super early moments. I mean,
Yeah,
that part of like the funding ecosystem, data, according to the data, has been less impacted, but it's
right.
just tricky because there's not a lot to go by. And so like maybe you could be successful getting somebody to be excited about the vision, and some people do that, obviously. But there's just not a ton of information to show like what's
Hmm.
working or what isn't, right? And in our case, we were fortunate enough to have made some really meaningful progress on revenue and on, growing the team and on kind of figuring out the right kind of customer for us and so forth. And so as we went into that process, in Q2 of last year, sort of at the beginning of the summer, we were able to have numbers that sort of showed, I think, investors who were interested, hey, clearly there's something here. Like, let me take a look and dive a little
Nice.
deeper. So I think that helps a lot, for sure. I also think, the environment absolutely very tough. Although again, the data says like seed maybe not as impacted,
Right.
so that's helpful. But I also, in my experience, I think I found that people are still very active and there's a lot of checks being written, but businesses that maybe don't have some fundamentals in order are a lot harder to fund today than they were in 2020,
Right.
2021, when money was cheap, zero interest rate, all of that stuff. And like, I think by and large, that's okay, right? Because, you saw companies in that era getting valuations that were just like astronomical and really untethered from
Crazy.
reality. And it can be super exciting as a founder, obviously, to get a term sheet with a valuation that, feels big, because it's like, but I think the number one thing, and I'm sure everybody listening already knows that, but the number one thing is like, don't tie any of your value, any of your internal mental value as a founder to like the valuation. I think it's just like, not like, that's a pricing structural function with investors. It has to do with capital, whatever. Great. But like, it's not the most important thing. The most important thing is customers, revenue, satisfaction, team. Like, those things to me are way more important, than valuation. And I think people got maybe their head turned around a little bit because of how easy it was to get a big number. And you do that, it's pretty hard to grow out of it. So I think those like fundamental things are kind of number one, and if you can
Amazing.
approach it that way, you're going to have an easier time with it. I mean, nothing's guaranteed, but obviously you're going to have
Yeah. No, people always freak out. Do I get the money or do I focus on growth? I need the money. It's a catch 22. But if you can stay super lean and get some, in a B2B SaaS space, get an early logo, get a high NPS score from a couple early customers, those things relax investors a lot. It goes from a total crapshoot shot in the dark to, oh, okay, I see what they're going to do with this money. And it's pretty obvious that people are liking this product. They just need some fuel on this fire, and that becomes a lot less risky investment. So that's excellent feedback, which brings me into my next question. $5.3 million, you're already getting traction. What do you need? I mean, you mentioned probably a lot of it went to building out that support team and having the service side of the business, but what are you spending money on to grow the company?
I think the biggest thing is really just making sure you're investing in kind of each area of the company and thinking about like company building as a activity, right? That it's not just about kind of spending money to solve the most immediate problem or sort of increase something like, hey, we need to spend more on marketing or more on sales. Like, yes, right, you obviously are investing cash to help you grow. And I think the other big thing to the prior question is like, if you don't think you're building a super high growth business, right, with the opportunity to 2x, 3x a year, in the early days at a minimum, you have to be really careful about raising investor money, right? Or at least from venture capital investors. There's other kinds of investors and friends and family rounds and
Yeah.
other things. But like, if you don't want to build a business that's pushed to grow at the highest possible rate, you should be really careful taking investor capital because,
Good point.
if for venture investors to be successful in their work and return money to their investors, they have to see growth profiles like that. And so I think, again, that's one of those things where over the last decade, like a lot of people sort of said, all right, well, to build any business, I'm going to raise money from investors. And, lots of kinds of companies that probably had no business raising money from venture ended up taking money from venture. And certainly I mentioned we had a media company, like we went through kind of trying to figure that out and talking to more venture investors versus other kinds of investors. So we learned a lot through that, through trial and error. But I think that ties into your other question. So, if you raise money, you're investing for growth and to try to build an engine that can scale. And that means you have to think about like the company as like, a machine that you're creating and building and investing in. And so you have to have the right people in each area and the right structure and so forth. And you're sort of trying to get the right people in place, the right structure, and then the right amount of experimentation until you figure out what works. So that's kind of the way I think about it, is that it's kind of a cohesive thing. And, that's a thing often you get asked like, well, what are you going to spend the money on? And I think it's sort of like, there's actually only ever one answer to that question, which is like
Growth.
company building, and trying to put the company in a good position to grow, but like,
Okay.
if you've got a business like your D2C company or something, and exactly how much it costs you to acquire a customer, and all you need is just more money to pour into paid marketing. Like, I think a lot of times you don't, in that kind of setting, need investor capital, and you can get working capital, you can get invoice factoring, you can get, loans. I mean, if you just like, hey, I need more money to pay for more ads because I know exactly what that payback is and it's good numbers. Like, I don't know that,
Don't get a
you need a
VC.
lot of,
Yeah.
yeah, or at least not in every circumstance, unless you're trying to like scale and take over the world, right?
Yeah.
But in
Good
software,
point.
like it costs a lot of money to compete, right? Because you have to build basic expectations, you have to have infrastructure, those things take more time to pay off. And so that's where investor capital is helpful. So
Makes sense.
that's kind of how I think about it. It's just like what's appropriate for what kind of company you're trying to build. And then that's how we try to make our bets.
It's really good feedback. I mean, I think a lot more founders are second guessing taking venture capital this year than I've ever seen before,
Yeah.
and appreciating that slower growth with more freedom and recognizing because there's been failures from companies that have taken too much venture capital and then grown too fast and then not had the company building, as you mentioned, as a major focus for the business. And it was just pouring it into, trying to get more market share from a competitive market with paid ads and exposure on branding. So that's really good feedback. But let's dive a little deeper if you're comfortable. What are the actual channels that you're using to grow the business right now? Because, whatever you're comfortable to talk about, I have some ideas I want to share with you. I understand the target. So what can you share that's working and hasn't worked right now from a growth
Yeah.
perspective?
Totally. I mean, I think for us, one thing we've learned is that showing up in person is really valuable. So we do a lot of like conferences and trade shows and events. That's a really useful place to sort of show what we can do and be present, especially when you're building a newer brand and people maybe aren't, familiar with your company. So that's a big one for us.
Interesting.
We have a really awesome SDR team that does a lot of outbound work and is really successful in sort of establishing new relationships and finding
Great.
folks who might want to take a look at what we can do. And then obviously we do a variety of paid kind of inbound advertising and things like that as well. And we're starting now a little bit earlier on the journey, but we're starting to make more content and do some of our our own content marketing and so
Dog
forth
food
as
that.
well. Yeah.
Yeah, use the tool yourself, grow a big newsletter. I mean, why not? Or a bunch of different newsletter. It
Well, we
makes
definitely
sense.
have those,
Yeah,
but other channels now we're starting to experiment with and so
great.
forth too. So yeah, we're
Nice.
sort of, we got a foot in a lot of those places, but definitely sort of being present with customers, I think is a really valuable part of it that sometimes gets ignored.
Absolutely.
And you
Yeah,
got to
and
be
then,
thoughtful about that.
at the early days, it's good to do things that don't scale. It's hard to really scale, even with $5 million, the conference acquisition strategy. But like you said, when people are still scared of AI. These are not old school clients, but larger organizations tend to take larger bureaucratic decision sales cycles. So when you're face to face and can show them, then they can go back and bring this value to their team really quickly. Um,
Exactly.
do you find that it's more of a bottoms up sales approach or top down? What I mean by that is it C-level decision that's yes, we're going to use this, or is it a
Yep.
marketing manager that's like, oh my God, I found this awesome tool?
It's a great question. I mean, we see a lot of both actually, and it sort of depends on the size of the company. So in smaller companies, it tends to be more top down, and in bigger companies, it tends to be more bottoms up, just sort of by the nature of the size of the business and so forth. So it definitely varies, but we do see both of those for sure.
Nice.
The folks who are kind of in those production roles, I mean, what they tend to like about Letterhead is like, hey, we're saving them a lot of time and like a lot of efficiency in their workflow and all of that. And if you're sitting there, struggling every day with what you're doing, that looks really appealing. So we get a lot of that. And then, at the C-suite level, we're able to talk about kind of scale and efficiency and revenue and things like that. So yeah, it depends on sort of the size of company that we're talking
Yeah.
to.
Nice. What with those SDRs, how big of a team did you spring for like early out the gate? I think that's always interesting for companies post funding. First thing founders want to do is get out of sales usually
Yeah.
and give that up because it's just like fundraising. It can really take a lot of your time. I've heard from founders you never hire just one because they got to have some healthy competition in there. But how did you go about building that team out?
It's interesting. Yeah. I mean, I think my view is that I haven't heard that you never start just one. I mean, I think being kind of milestone based about it is really important. Like it's super easy in my view to go out and spend a bunch of money in one of two ways, right? Either hiring one really expensive like VP or head of sales
Right.
or something like that, who and you see people like overhire or sort of, bring somebody in who's maybe not a direct fit, right? Who is maybe more at the strategic level or whatever. And when you're trying to transition off of founder-led sales, it's like you kind of need somebody to like get in the muck with you and just like make phone calls and help grow the business. But the other thing I think you can do is like if you hire too many people up front, you end up investing a lot of money while you're still actually figuring out what works because moving from founder-led sales to not founder-led sales is one big transition in and of itself, and then figuring out how to take what at that point should be working and scale it with across multiple salespeople is a totally other additional skill set and
Costly.
and thing
Yeah.
to do. And so I think if you mix those experiments at the same time, you can end up with some really costly results. So for us, it was kind of step by step. It was, bringing in a sort of sales lead who could sort of, be in the mix and actually do some of the work and really was wanted to execute. And then starting to bring in our first SDR and then our first account executive and, then scaling it up. So it wasn't a
Nice.
kind of all at once type of thing. I think because,
Smart.
at each stage of making that investment, you want to see that it's working. And I think that's tricky, particularly if you've raised money where, that you feel a pressure to sort of deploy that capital and go super
Yeah.
fast. But it definitely takes more time to invest a bunch, fuck it up, and then try to figure out how to fix it than it does to sort of be a little bit more methodical about it. as you go. So I think that's a general thing. And even at this next phase where we're a bigger business now, and looking at some of these roles and so forth, you see the same thing where there's a lot of advice to, go get the top person you can, whatever. But then when you talk to a lot of people who've done it, they say, hey, be really careful,
Hold off.
going out and spending too much money, too quickly, because you think you need to click up. Like there's a kind of incremental, step-by-step approach to that can really actually help you go faster in the end.
Yeah. I'm reading a book about patience right now, and the
I
author
don't have
used the
that.
story of I'll send you the link. I can't think of the name off
Yeah,
the top of
please
my
do.
head, but the author was yesterday I was reading was making the example of making a mango salsa, and she was rushing for dinner, and the very last ingredient was salt, and since she was moving so fast, she put like 5x too much salt and ruined the salsa and had to start all the way over. And having patience to slow it down actually saves you time, like you said, because you don't have to go back and money, obviously, in your scenario too. I mean, she threw away a bunch of mangoes in that salsa. So, yeah, that makes sense. Let's talk like marketing. Are these SDRs getting their own leads, or what are you doing to get the leads for them? They're like cold calling, or they're, using automation
We use all the
software.
channels. We don't do a ton of automation. I think we're a little
That's
bit more
funny.
skeptical of that, but
Okay.
particularly just at the stage where you're still relatively early. You're still building your business. And so getting the positioning right really matters, right? I mean, particularly if you're in a space where there are existing solutions. Like, again, we sell to people who
Hmm.
already have an email list and are already
Right.
doing something. They may not be doing the newsletters they want, or they may not have the scale they want, or whatever,
Yeah.
but they're doing something. And so if I call and I'm like, would you like a solution? You might be like, well, I already have one, right? And so what's the point? Whereas if I can talk to you about what are the pain points and how can I help you scale that and these specific talking points, you're like, oh, well, I actually am interested in taking a look at that. So
Yep.
the difference that getting that positioning spot on, I think really, really matters.
100%.
And I don't think we're yet at the point anyway where any kind of AI sales tool that I have seen, of course, I'm sure there are many I haven't seen, but is able to generate that in a reliable way for different kinds of customers and
Totally.
ICPs for an earlier stage business. If you're like Salesforce or something, I think it's probably easier
Yeah.
to
They know
deploy
the
that kind of product.
brands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But for us, it's like, we really want that frontline insight, and we want to, like, I don't know what to call it, but like the texture of the feedback that you get from like actual humans calling people
Yeah.
is really useful. And so,
Yep.
I think we really wanted to get that. So no, we don't do a ton of that. We do use tools like Apollo. We love Apollo. It's super, super great kind of
Right.
sales enablement tooling and things like that. So
Yep.
there's definitely software that we're using to make things more efficient for
Of
sure.
course. Good.
But yeah, and we have obviously a number of different kind of groups that we're targeting and things like that are under.
Yeah. Okay. I think this might be the area where I can create some value for you, Chris, because everything you said has been massively valuable for the listeners. Super excited to get this episode out. But automation is not just AI with the outreach stuff. And you're totally right. You want to have the team collectively focused on manual, hard to do stuff so that they can get the qualitative data on what's resonating with people. That's another reason those conferences are so important. You're face to face, but you need to have collective um, quantitation of everything at the end. Like, what is working from this conference? What did you hear that's working? Let's
Absolutely.
look at these organic messages that people are sending out. What is the features and the price point, or the things that are resonating with people? And you need to be able to make sure as a team that we're gathering that data, and then once we feel comfortable that we know what's really working, we can use automation, but not necessarily AI like message creation or AI calling. I don't really like those tools still yet, unless you are a really established brand. I've seen recordings or heard recordings of
Yeah.
Apple and Tesla doing them, and at scale, just reminding people that there's payment plans and things like that does
Right.
convert sometimes for those brands. But you know, you mentioned calling people and just saying, "Hey, do you have an email solution?" Not going to work, because they're going to say yes. You have to be able to focus on the differentiators that you have. Like, do you have an AI tool that's saving you, blah, blah, blah hours with your email or are you guys doing 20 different emails to different segments? They're going to say no, or they're going to be like, yes. And it's like, but once a year,
Yep.
because it's so time consuming. You got to hit on that pain point that actually makes you so different.
Absolutely.
And that's probably what's working organically. And so if you quantify that and figure that out, you can take tools like Apollo, build huge lists, and then use a tool called Duck Soup. If you know Duck Soup.
Okay.
DUX-Soup, $50 a month. You can get each
What are these
SDR's
names?
LinkedIn profile on it. Yeah, I'll send to you. This is just one. There are a lot of other LinkedIn automation tools, but this one has worked the best for the past 12 months with my team. It's one of the first tools out there from a long time ago. I stopped using it for a while. We were using Conversify, which went out of business, an AI tool. And I think Apollo also does some automation, but it just never worked for us. The Duck Soup, it just works. And the key is not because everyone's doing LinkedIn automation. And so I know you're listening to me like, dude, this is not advice. Of course, we thought about this, but here's the secret sauce. It's writing a message that's informal. It's not, hey, Andrew, I saw that you work with GrowthExpertz. Congratulations on your success and all this bullshit. It's, hey, are you guys doing at least 10 different emails to different segments? If not, we should chat. Like, that's pure value for me. I actually tell interns that we work with in our fractional CMO program, we get an intern for the startup and then we train them up from zero. And I'm like, write it how you would even text your friend. Like the more informal, the better. We have a campaign that's working for a cybersecurity B2B SaaS client right now. And the connection messages, it has the word badass in it. I can't remember what it's like. We got a badass cybersecurity tool, and people are like, what who would say something? What they literally respond, high response rate. What's this badass tool? Tell me about it. Because they're like, nobody would say that in an automation. So that's really the key for these SDRs or the only downside is you're growing this employees audience. So we try to get C-level people to do it the most, even if you feel I have a telecommunications client. He's like, I don't want to meet myself, the CEO, to reach out to other CEOs. I want it to look like the company's bigger. I'm like, I know, but we want to grow your audience, build your thought leadership, because the halo effect of this campaign is that you're getting to 10, 15,000 followers and connections on LinkedIn that are going to organically engage with content that you're sharing. You mentioned that you're ramping up your content. Usually CEOs are resharing what the company's sharing. So you're actually converting people organically years down the line. I mean, I get message responses from 2019 from doing automation. They didn't respond to any of the automation, but then they see a post and they go to message me and they see that there's messages from years ago. So you have to be a little weary. Maybe you don't do it for new employees LinkedIn, like they need to be in the role at least like 3 or 4 months. And I mean, it's a benefit. It's like a benefit for them. We're going to grow your leads. We're going to grow your audience. And then you can use content for them and they can convert their organic audience. So I think that really works really well. On the email side, since you're in the email business, it makes sense to do some outreach via email. I know I've mentioned this tool before on the podcast. I hope it's not redundant to people, but it just works so well. It's reply.io.
Sure.
Reply.io, just a drilled down, boiled down sales outreach tool. But they have some really amazing AI features. One is a green to red, like email deliverability, like a visual tool. And that actually subconsciously trains the team on how to write really good emails for deliverability. It teaches you what spam words are, the readability, the length of emails. I mean, even on the spam word side, marketing, the word marketing is a spam word. You don't know that. So if you're emailing marketing agencies and saying the word marketing, it might not actually get delivered. And going back to what I said, like the less formal the email, like, again, with these new students that we train all the time, I'm constantly fighting with them. Don't say, how are you doing? I hope you're doing well. Hope this email finds you well.
Sincerely yours.
Yeah, I don't even introduce myself. I just go, hey, Andrew, I got this amazing tool that's going to save you this much, like straight to the value. So reply really helps with that. And, with Apollo, you can, extrapolate a really large list and have those two tools fighting against each other to see which one drives the most leads. I bet on LinkedIn every time versus email these days. But like a lot, had a pitch yesterday from an AI tool that helps pick achievements and things that are news related for you and writes an email. Hey, Andrew, I saw you wrote this book and congratulations on launching your fractional CMO program. That doesn't work as well as people think. It's the short, how you would write it, your real self. When you say hello, it goes to spam. But if you say hi or hey, Google and Yahoo and other email service providers assume that you're a friend. So a one-line email that says, hey, is going to get delivered. So using those tools properly like that can still really work. I don't know if you guys have thought about that stuff, but it can really load up those SDRs with lots of conversations without having to take there's so much of their time for prospecting. And hopefully that can help a little bit.
I love that, and I think there's a great there's a lot of one thing I think is a great get a little piece of advice for people is like finding folks if you can who have done sales like prior to the internet, um, because they have that bone just innately by virtue of it's phone or it's in person or it's whatever. But that thing of like we have one person on our team and she had been selling all kinds of stuff for kind of her whole career, but
Wow.
her thing is like, yeah, what's in it for me, right? Don't worry me this whole, hey, congratulations or whatever, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, okay, yeah, but like I already know all of that, right? What can you do for me, right? And if you're confident that you can actually offer something, then lead with that,
Lead with
man. I'm
that. Yeah.
busy. And yeah, I get so much fucking spam. You can absolutely tell when it's generated by AI. You just
Yeah.
can.
Yeah.
And you can tell when the person hasn't done any research and has no idea what we're doing. They just found me in a database and they didn't bother to look at the website. You can tell that too. Right. But if it's like, boom, I have this, right? Here's exactly what we do, right? The value proposition, I agree with that 100%.
Love
And,
it.
but that's a thing of like in the internet era, we all learned this really weird way of doing it.
Yeah.
And it's part of why we talk to people about, these content driven email products being so important because, when you have a sales ask, to your point, that should be super short, super simple, really focused on the value.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have a content driven relationship with people and you're sending newsletters or you're doing whatever channels you're investing in, that's what supplies you with that more relationship oriented thing that you're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
When people are doing that, like they're trying to be my friend on LinkedIn,
Yeah.
like you can do that on other channels and with other products, but
Totally.
that allows your sales team to go out there and say like, this is exactly what we do. And just, they're not trying to be friends because if you're trying to build a relationship, hey, you've got actually other channels for that. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's a really important part of it too.
Absolutely. Love it. I think I got one more potential marketing hack
Hit
idea for
me.
you guys. Are you virtualizing, if that's a word, those in-person, face-to-face like conference things that you're
Not
doing at
yet.
all?
No, that really
Okay.
hasn't been an area
Great.
of big investment for us. So
All
yeah,
right.
I'm taking
We'll
notes.
talk about that. You can hack it, you can limp into it, you can do all the things that you mentioned with very little time and money investment. Using LinkedIn ads and a LinkedIn event and an Eventbrite webinar. It doesn't really need to be that crazy. I think that it can be a free event. Learn how to 10x your newsletter business for enterprise clients, sponsored by Letterhead. And that was a major way that HubSpot grew. It was, I was the marketer that got invited to those virtual events and in-person events in San Francisco decades
Yeah,
ago. And it was like 5% about HubSpot, but the branding is there and people are like, hi, I'm from HubSpot, but it's pure value event. And so for you, it's, how to create better content as a team, how to, leverage what you've got in your team. I don't know. There's 4 or 5 easy things that are not common sense to a company that's doing a million other things,
totally.
that because you've worked with so many companies, what you've seen work, you have a lot more data than one individual data point. So it's easy to put that together. And then everybody that attends usually gets like, a month free or 6 months free and then a bunch of sales calls from the team afterwards. But it converts because they're there, they're enthralled, they're
Yeah,
listening. It's low impact. It's a virtual event. It can happen multiple
100%.
places, multiple times. We have 2 going at the same day for most of our clients for different time zones and stuff. And the way we promote those is from actually putting a message into Duck Soup, going back to that automation. So, hey, the third or fourth message, if they haven't responded to feature call outs and a discount or a link to book a call with a sales team, hey, check out this webinar that you're going to learn pure value. That usually works.
Interesting.
Obviously, creating social media content, putting it on search platforms like Eventbrite gets a little bit more exposure. Sending it to VCs, well, if you're selling to startups like these clients, but sending it to organizations that have large amounts of could be the Marketing Agency Association of America or whatever, then they promote it. But on top of that, doing some LinkedIn ads hacking. I mean, when I say hacking, I mean like bidding 50 cents a click on a LinkedIn ad. Believe it or not, when your audience is really large, like we want to target a CEO of anyone in the media space, nationwide in America is going to be like 1.9 million people or so. So you're going to get 30 to 50 cent clicks on that, couple hundred registrants for maybe $1,000. And you'd be surprised, again, only about 50% of people are going to show up to the live recording. Then you have to send them on some email automation, which, you guys can easily create that content and segment to them based on how big they are. But I think if you're seeing the conference stuff work out, I mean, it's so costly, right? To ship a team, book booth space, buy the roll-up banners. If you compare that to virtual, it's not obviously as large of an impact, but if it's 10% with 0.5% investment, pretty good deal. So I think that should definitely be something that you guys should check out in the future. And that concludes my free advice for today, I think. But
I appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, what a cool company. I have some companies I'm going to recommend it to. I don't know if you have a referral program yet, but that's definitely something you should think about.
We do indeed.
Nice. All right. Well, we'll be talking about that offline.
Looking forward to it.
And thank you so much for being here today, man. Super valuable.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for the advice.
Letterhead.ai, right?
That's the one.
Wants to check it out. Awesome. Chris, have a great day. Talk to you soon.
You too. All right, talk soon.
That has been another episode of the Funded Now What podcast with your host, Andrew Lee Miller. Brought to you by GrowthExpertz. If you liked the episode, please subscribe. And if you really liked it, please share with other founders and entrepreneurs. Thanks, and we'll see you in the next episode.